So without further ado, let me introduce tonight's guest, Mr. Greg Sutton from TinyEYE. Welcome him. So now you're an executive director. I think part of the inspiration of your story for me is that I relate to the fact that you didn't just pick a field and study and then became the junior, and then you became the junior executive, then you became the senior. You really have a diverse experience, right? Like you didn't, it's incredible actually from my perspective that you went out and did what you kind of thought you could do, and you did your best, right? So, and that kind of took you now to this weird executive director position for 1 year. Mm-hmm. Did that just last 1 year?
No, it was about 5 years that I stayed there, and that was probably one of my most formative times in learning about a business. In that we had everything. It mimicked every reality of running a business. We had cash flow problems, all these kind of things, and I was really in the throes of it. I just didn't own the business, or I wasn't. So I had the effects of feeling the ride of it, but I didn't know the upside, or if it was successful. It was still a job, but it was nonetheless, it was a great training ground, and that was always something for me that I looked at it for. So, we'd talk about, like, we had times where there was me and I had a project manager, Fred Amaya, working, and we had some tough months where we would go 2 months without paying ourselves, and then project funding would come through, or whatever the heck we were doing, and we'd pay ourselves. And for me, it was like, okay, this is the reality of what it's like to run a business, and I got to get used to this and understand how this works if I'm going to do this in a much bigger scale. And when we started TinyEYE and we ran into some of these issues, I'd been living it for 5 years already, and so it wasn't stressful, it wasn't uncertainty, it wasn't the end of the world if I didn't get paid this month, because I'd done all the things to prepare myself for that. And that's part, when people start businesses, that you don't recognize. A lot of people don't think about the personal side of their life. So what I'd been doing over that 5-year period is I bought a house with a basement suite, and the basement suite covered the mortgage payment for my house. And for the first few years I lived there, I had a roommate, and that covered the expenses, so I lived cash-free basically. And then I had a car, I paid that off, I paid down all my debt, and I could live very well on like $500 a month, and and go out for beers, do whatever. And when you can put yourself in that spot and have a nice lifestyle, you can start a business and take on a lot of extra risk and not need that extra cash flow coming back to you because you got this big mortgage, you got a fancy truck in the driveway, you got your boat, your skidoos, and all your whatever else you need to have fun. And nothing wrong with those things, but when you're starting a business, there's trade-offs, right? And so that was one of the things that I did during that time frame. So
and you're exactly right. I think from a common theme of most of the entrepreneurs we've interviewed is success is in the preparation. Anybody can get a line of credit and buy a business and go in debt and starve. But really the most successful people I've ever met are the guys that go, look, this is my goal, and I'm not going to match my friends the first 5 years at Potash Corp. I'm going to work my tail off, and then I'm going to be selling stuff in Brazil. I'm just kidding, but you don't go backwards. But that really is the genius of the entrepreneur, is the fact that there's a long-term goal, short-term pain to get there. Let's work our tail off. Mm-hmm. So you beat me to the punch a bit. You've now finished executive director, but you didn't just quit executive director. There was a transition there where where did TinyEYE come from, and how did that idea start? You were still the executive director when that idea started, so why don't you go there? You're executive director. Sure. TinyEYE. How did that even birth? For sure. So during that time, I had looked at a number of different, I'd written about 10 different business plans, and everybody I talked to, I always ask, what are your key problems? What are your challenges? The best businesses, in my opinion, if anybody out here is wanting to start a business or is grow their business, is solve a problem. The businesses that tend to fail the most are the ones that are the solutions, and then they go out and look for problems, right? But if you start with the problem, a problem that there's a lot of value in solving, your chances of success are much higher.
You can still succeed the other way around too. But anyways, so I had written about 10 business plans and gotten to a point in each of them where I just couldn't figure out the next step. I didn't have the resources, I didn't have the knowledge base, I didn't have whatever it was to move it forward, or I found out that there was no market. And TinyEYE came out of a conversation with my sister, and I was asking her what's her challenges in her job, and she is a speech-language pathologist, and to be a speech-language pathologist, it takes about 7 years of education. And so 7 years of education, saddled with student loans, and then you're put in this role where you're driving from one school to the next and spending about half your day sitting in your car. You're spending only a couple hours a day working with these kids that have communication challenges or cognitive disabilities, and then doing another couple hours of reporting and paperwork. Extremely inefficient. And then there's this huge shortage of speech-language pathologists in the industry. And so I thought about it, and I said, well, can you just do this online? What if we did this with webcams and headsets and eliminated your driving time, and could we automate the reporting? And she said, yeah, I think we could do that. And I said, oh, cool. And she said, well, how long would it take to make something to do that? And I was like, I don't know, 6 weeks, a couple months. You know, and 10 years later, we're still building it. But but we've made a lot of ground. We have over 100 speech therapists now that deliver services every day, and we're in about we're 31 states and 5 provinces and 12 countries, and all sorts of great things have come from that 10 years ago. So I was the executive director at the time, and I held on to my job as long as I could support the both. And so it was really great the way that SADA let me transition. I spoke to the board and said, look, I'm wanting to start a company, and you know, I just don't know how the hell do I do this. How long can I keep my job while I do this? And they said, yeah, that's fine. You know, as long as you're doing what needs to be done and running the organization and maintaining it and not driving it into the ground, we're happy to support you. We're all about supporting entrepreneurs, and it was really a great place. So I rented the office across the hall from where I was working, hired a programmer, and switched my paycheck to pay him, and switched my contract from me to TinyEYE so that I could actually put the money towards him without getting it as income, paying taxes on it, then investing it back into a company. I just put it over to the company.
Finance degree?
Finance degree. Yeah, that was totally it, right? And then we leveraged that money with IRAP funds and with a few other things, and did that we got the first version of our prototype, and we got some sales going. Before I quit my job, we had about 180,000 in sales or something like that before I was fully quit my job, which gave us traction, which gave us money in the bank, which gave us the ability to pay and do some things. And that was a huge part for us, is proving that there was a viable model. It wasn't just, you know, at some point you gotta prove it. You gotta get a random customer, somebody who's not your uncle, somebody who's not just your friend trying to help you out, somebody who you don't know today, to pay for what you're doing, and the value they're receiving is greater than the cost that they're giving you. And that's where we got to.
So, being kind of a I don't really know what the right word to say, but you're an internet company. What's the word? You know what I mean? Where you're not face to face.
We're an online company.
Online. We're online. Good Lord. We're been around the internet long enough. You're on the line. Yeah. You're in that internet. How does that internet thing work? So you're an online company. I see that, I mean, from the outsider perspective, I would think that most of your success is going to be in the rural communities, in the places that don't have the access to the hospital or wherever the speech therapists hang out, mm-hmm. Right? So what was kind of your marketing plan? You say to your sister, look, we can do this. She's obviously traveling. So where's your first kind of, where are you focusing your efforts at the beginning?
For sure. So, yeah, at the beginning, we had it completely wrong, 100% wrong. and we're going 100 miles an hour down the wrong road into a dead end, and that was a really interesting time for us. Our business plan was we were going to build software, and when we started, this was 2005, and if you guys can remember 2005, Facebook was not there, Twitter was not there was no such thing as YouTube, no one in the world had done a Skype call, no one had done FaceTime, none of these things existed, and that's not that long ago, but it was a completely different world. So online therapy was like we were out selling Star Trek. It was people were like, what the, this is impossible, get the crap out of here, right? And our first business plan was to license the software to schools so they could use it to make their 4 therapists be as efficient as 5 would be. And so instead of having to hire an extra person, they could use our system and do the same amount of work. And that was destined for failure, and we didn't realize it soon enough. But we did realize it eventually. And one of the great things at that point is we had some angel investment, we had some seed funding to help us. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough to get us going and get some momentum and really get some gas in our tank. And if we had gone out and raised $1 million from a venture capitalist or something along that lines, we would have spent it all on the wrong business plan. But I used to have a line on my spreadsheet. It was called Days Till Death, and that was when I'd remortgaged everything I'd had. My visas were all maxed. Everything was, you know, how many days until all that is done? And the closest we got was 9 days. But 9 days is a lot of time, right? I had 4 days to get to Brazil, right? You know, like I was like, I've been here before. I can do this. But it's cutting it pretty tight. And with selling software, it comes out of the capital budget of the school, not the operational budget, so it has to be approved at a board level. That's something we didn't know about. There's also you have the people that are making the decisions are not the users, and so there's huge resistance to change, and there was all these cultural things that we didn't know about. We did literally 1,000 demos, and at the end, people would always say, hey, this is great. I see how you can make our 4 work like 5, but at the end of the day, we just need another therapist. And so it only took about 1,000 times of hearing that before the light bulb came on. And I said, well, why don't we just provide you a therapist? And so the first time I tried selling that, I closed a deal for about $80,000 in 15 minutes. And I was like, holy moly, okay, we got to change the website, change everything, blah, blah, blah. And, but it was another one of those early successes that taught me the wrong lessons, right? And it took me about 6 months before I closed the next deal after that. However, it got us going on the right track, and we changed our business model completely from selling software to actually selling the services through our software. Yeah. And there's a much higher value proposition through selling the services than there is through just providing the system.
So when you say selling your services through the software, you now have, like you said, you have 100 speech therapists that are doing it via the internet, right? So you're getting to remote locations, not always. I didn't tell you this, but my son used TinyEYE.
Oh.
Yeah, and had great success.
Oh, wow.
So thank you very much.
Oh, well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, cheers to that.
Hey, cheers. Thank you. And it was fun for him. Like, this is now the dad, right? The proud dad. I mean, we all love our kids. We don't necessarily like to hang out with them, but we love our kids. I mean, wait a minute. Everyone's like, some people are offended. Some of the people are offended. Wait a minute. This Friday night, when you're bored, think, hey, we should hang out with a 5-year-old. I guarantee none of you say that, so stop being offended. Anyway, my son, beautiful boy. His name's Jude. And he thinks the Beatles wrote that song for him. Technically, I named him after the song, but he's a great kid. And as a parent, we all want the best for our children, right? Like, and I especially, but I wanted, my son was really struggling with a stutter. And he couldn't, like, you could tell that he wanted to say something, he just couldn't say it. And it was heartbreaking for my wife and I. And we were trying to figure out what can we do? Like, he's about to get into kindergarten. We don't want him to be the weird kid because he's handsome. So like, either he's handsome and doesn't talk and then gets a wife that's rammy, and we don't want that at Christmas. I'm just trying to make it break up because I was about to cry. But anyway, so we were looking at the options, and I remember sitting at the Sabex Awards, and you guys had won this thing, and it's TinyEYE, and I'm like, TinyEYE? That sounds like a concert in Australia. I'm just kidding. So obviously we're looking into it, and we realize, wait a minute, this is something we should look into, because what people don't understand is like, to get into a speech therapist is not only a process, but sometimes it's a long time. Mm-hmm. And there's a certain age where it's not government granted anymore, like you're paying. And we're fairly busy, like most young couples, I think. So this was an option for us, and part of it was this cool experience for my boy, because he got the headphones and the mic, and he got to look at the computer, and he had a great time. And I wish I could say who the speech therapist was. I work and I pay the bills. I don't really pay attention. I'm the typical dad. But it literally was the process that changed not only my son's future, but it really made life easier for him, I think. And most businesses don't have that credibility. They have it's a transaction, where yours is really life-changing, which is insane. And it's cool to see that in Saskatoon. But the cool part about it is that's really the Saskatchewan way. Like, you've traveled all over the world. I moved here from Calgary, and we went to a place called, and I think I've told this story before, but we went to a place called California Subs. I don't know if you guys remember California Subs. And my wife and I pulled in. We had literally, like, we were staying at the, I don't even remember what hotel. And we were about to check out the city, and went to this California Subs place, and we walked in, and the girl was like, "Oh, I love your hair." Not to me, obviously. My toupee shifted before filming. And they said, "I love your hair." And it's such a trivial thing for people, I think, to understand, but that's huge. Like, in Calgary, no one says to a stranger, "I love your hair," or "You look great." And I'm not saying Calgary's a negative place, but there's something unique and something we should be proud about in Saskatchewan. And it's this community that we all feel for each other. And there's a business like you that kind of is exemplifying that. So you're now at 100 speech therapists. How many people do you have, like, in the administration, in the office part?
We have about 20 people on our corporate team.
So you're really working with 120 people on a regular basis. You're changing lives. Obviously, you've had some bumps in the road in that process, learning. You've also had some tremendous successes. What in your last 10 years would you look back and say, you know what, that's a point in my life that I would say that was a huge success, that we could kind of put the flag down and say, from this point forward, we're moving ahead?
Wow, that's an interesting question.
One an interview. I'll have one interesting question an interview.
For me personally, there's one, and for the business, there's many, I think, along the way. When we started the business, I didn't know up from down about speech therapy and the impact it could have on people's lives. I just knew my sister was a speech therapist, and that she drove around in her car all day. But I really didn't know what she was doing or what changes that made and that kind of thing. And it wasn't actually until a couple years into the business that I got to see firsthand. And it was this little boy named Tyrone. He's in Alberta, in a rural town, and we had approached the school 6 months earlier and tried to bring them on as a client, and they didn't want to for whatever reasons, you know. And I got a call saying, "Look, Greg, we have this little kid here. He comes from a foster home. He's really, like, his background is worse than anything you could ever imagine. And he hasn't spoken in 6 months. We don't know what to do. Can you guys try, you know, seeing if you can help him?" And so his condition's called selective mutism. He has the ability to speak, but he selects not to, and and for various reasons. And so we said, sure, you know, of course we'll try. We'll move forward, you know, and we don't approach things with just reckless abandonment. We try, you know, we use all sorts of best practices, all this kind of stuff. And it was just so freaking awesome. We have this the way our system works is it's like Skype, but like on steroids. It's got, you see your video, and then we have these shared games that people play, and it's really interactive, and it's all cartoony, and the kids just love it. And we have this one game, it's called Peekaboo Puppy, and it's very simple. All it is if the kid says open or any word, the therapist will open the door, and there's a silly dog there that dances around. And so they played this game, and the therapist, one of our better therapists, we put on this, you know, and we've got lots of great ones. And within 5 minutes of sitting down with Tyrone, who hadn't spoken in 6 months, he said open. And it was just, is just like, holy crap, you know, like this. He's got limited vocabulary, he's got all sorts of challenges, but he has a voice, you know, and we helped him find that. And in this world, if you can't communicate, there's very little you can do. And we worked with him for a couple years after that and got him back to a level where he was just normally participating in a social environment, in a school, and all these kind of things. But for me, that was probably the moment where, like, holy crap, we just, you know, we actually made a difference in somebody's life. That I'll never meet him personally, he'll never know me, and that doesn't matter. It's, you know, even if our whole business goes to hell in a handbasket, I feel we've made a dent in the universe. We've had that, and the great thing is we've replicated that thousands of times for thousands of kids in thousands of places, you know, and it's just, it's an amazing business to be in that regard, and that, you know, you don't need an alarm clock to get out of bed. Because, you know, if I do my best job, there is a whole world of people out there besides me that are going to have a better life, or at least an opportunity to have a better life. And I think
Shaw TV, there's like 1,000 people clapping right now.
anyways, it's really nice, and it's you know, everybody, it's easy to. It's easier to be engaged in your work when you know you can do those things. And everybody can do that in their job. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You just have to find where that connection is to somebody and making what you do matter, you know?
Good night, man. This is the first Chamber on Tap ever I've like been emotional. Good night. Who's putting roofies in this lumberjack ale? Oh, man.
Sorry, I rambled on there.
No, this is brilliant. Like, and I've had this conversation with lots of people, but the truth is, this is what makes me proud to be involved with the Chamber in Saskatoon. It also makes me proud to be in Saskatchewan. That obviously there's money involved in business, because if you don't partner with somebody that can make money, you're not partnering with them for long. But the real win in any journey, and I think I try to tell this to my kids too, is not just that there's this financial success, it's that there's this community success. You've had obviously some personal success with this business. You've seen some growth. You now have, what's this thing that you have that can have NASA show up at places? Like, now you're taking it to the next level. So talk about your robot. I've never said that to any guest ever. Talk about your robot, and not meaning something else.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, about a year ago, we had a school district in a region that they were going through some economic transitions, and they didn't have there was nobody in the community that they could hire to help with the kids on their end. So in our model, in a traditional online therapy, you have a computer at the school and you have the therapist at their end, and they connect online. But there's an e-helper or a paraprofessional that gets the kids out of class, brings them to the computer, makes sure that they don't unplug the webcam and all that kind of stuff. Anyways, they didn't have anybody at the school, but they had this huge caseload. They needed help. And so I was talking to the director of the school there and said, you know, what if we got you a robot? What if we found a robot that could get the kids out of class and bring them there and do this, would you guys go for that? And he said, Sutton, man, if you find me a robot, I'm in. It's like, okay, that's a challenge I can't refuse. And we were brainstorming, thinking of ideas. I hung up and to the internet, you know, and off we go. And so I spent a couple hours researching, and I found a company out of California that was doing these experimental robots, the telepresent robots, and it's essentially a mini Segway with a telescopic pole that you can put an iPad on, and you can drive remotely. So you can be in another location and now have the ability to be telepresent and drive around. They're super cool, and it's just awesome. So I got in touch with the company and said, look, this is our situation. Can we partner with you guys? And they were at an early stage, and so we came to terms with them, and we helped them a little bit with their R&D and their marketing, and they help us with providing some robots and this and that. And so we were able to put a robot in in the school, and the robot goes to the classes and gets the kids out, brings them to another computer, as well as the person on the robot can go into the school or into the classrooms and teach a lesson or do whatever there. And
Is it live?
it's
Like
live. It's
somebody-
live. It's real time. So you can sit at your desktop. Like if you're the person driving, you just use your arrow keys and you can go around the school, knock on a door, go into the classroom, talk and engage, and it's just like you're there. It's so wild. It is, and the kids just love this. I mean, the adults love it too, but the kids they go crazy for this. They follow it around all day. Right now, there's a novelty factor to them, and so people are very excited. And so we've had NASA scientists come onto the robots and talk to kids and brought them to conferences and do a number of things like that. Like you can get a lot of people you call them up and say, hey, you want to drive a robot in rural wherever? Well, hell yeah. You know, who's going to turn that down? You know, and so it's really expanded our ability to bring experts into communities that would otherwise have no opportunity to have that expert show up and be part of that community. So it's been a lot of fun in that regard, and it's still very experimental for us. We've got, you know, a good handful of robots out in different communities in different regions of the world, and we're trying different, doing studies on them. We're partnering with different universities as well in studying the effectiveness and the changes that it brings. One of the biggest thing that a telepresent robot brings over just a Skype call or a FaceTime type thing is it's called agency. So when these robots, say if it was sitting here, it kind of nods and moves around a little bit, and so your brain assigns what's called agency to it, and it's the same feeling or sensation you get when a person is there versus when it's just a computer screen. And in our world, what we do, engagement is the biggest thing that impacts the outcome of the session, and agency increases that engagement factor, and so that's why we're doing it now. Anyways, that's the robot.
That's cool, the robot. So where do you see Saskatchewan now for your business as being posted here? Do you see more creative thoughts, or are you going to stick to the same path, or you see success? What do you see going forward?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, being in Saskatchewan and watching from when I was young to today, the growth and the changes we've had in the last 5 years or 10 years have been incredible compared to the time period before that, right? And for us, you know, there's the challenges we have, and many businesses have, is finding the right people for the jobs. And in our business, there's no other businesses that do the same thing that we do in Western Canada or in Canada. There's only a handful in the world, and so we really have to invent our business and the processes that drive our business every day. And finding the people to fit into those roles is always a challenge. There's great people here in Saskatchewan that we've been able to, that have built great careers within our company and have been very successful. And we've also utilized people in other locations. We have 20 people on our corporate team, and there's only, I don't know, 7 or 8 in Saskatoon. The rest work virtually. And so for us, work is an activity, it's not a location.
Greg, pleasure, man. Easily the top 50 guests we've had.
Wow. Yeah.
Thanks for coming, Greg.